Dave Jeck here, Superintendent of Fauquier County Public Schools, with the second to last edition of One Hard Question. And this wasn't a question per se. It was actually an email from a parent with some really interesting concerns that she wanted to share with me regarding SOL testing in general, local SOL testing policy, and about the letter I sent home regarding retakes of testing grades 3 through 8. And so I'm going to hit them. I'm just going to hit them all, or the majority of them, quickly, and you know, they're pretty straightforward. But let me start with the letter. There was a concern shared about why I'd sent a letter home to parents telling them what their children's rights are, their rights as parents in the event that their child fails an SOL test, and why the letter was sent at all and why it was sent so early. The answer is pretty straightforward. Last year, at this time, we had just learned that the state school board was going to allow schools to retest students at grade 3 through 8. Now, high school students have always been able to retake tests because they have, it's not required, but they often need to, because students have to, in high school, have to earn 7 verified credits, and if they don't graduate. So verified credit comes with passing the course and passing the corresponding SOL test. So that's always happened in high school. So this was a new thing last year, and so we got principals together, had a meeting. The questions were: do we notify parents? Do we not notify parents? If we do notify parents, do we send a letter? Do we make a call home, etc.? How do we notify them, or should we notify them that their children in grades 3 through 8 can retake tests if they want? The decision at that time was to let every school do something differently, and they did. Some called, some emailed, some did both. But the surprise was that the overwhelming majority of parents responded back that they were okay with their children in grades 3 through 8 retesting these SOL tests. That came as a surprise to all of us, because that's not what we expected. This year, principals asked me very point blank, will you write a letter, Superintendent Jack, to everyone so that everyone's hearing the same thing and everyone's doing essentially the same thing? And would you send it early? Because last year it was a situation where, again, we were sending this letter out and trying to get responses back very late in the game. So it made sense to send it earlier, because we start writing testing in March. So, but I get that it is early, and I kind of understand the potential message that's being conveyed in this about, you're going to retake a test that you might potentially fail, kind of a negative connotation. So I get that, but that's the history of it. Is they wanted to come from me, so everyone heard the same thing. And I will send it again next year. I'm just not sure about the timing. The other concern was about the opt-out and some different concerns, thoughts about opting out. Okay, first and foremost, any parent at any time can opt their child out of an SOL test. That is the parent's right, always. But there are ramifications that go along with it, and primarily, if you don't take a test, if the child doesn't take a test, it is a fail, and it's a reflection on the school and on the teacher. And one of the comments made by this parent, obviously a very concerned parent, is, is it more important, I'm paraphrasing, more important that my child feel comfortable in school and eager to learn and not stressed out, or do we want to just make the schools look good? And that's a hard one, because do we want all the schools to be accredited? We sure do. It's important. If any one school is not accredited in one area 2 years in a row, they have to go through the state improvement process, which is horrible. And if you've talked to any principal or teacher who's had to be involved in that process, it's horrible. It's just a horrible process. So what's more important than us being accredited is not having any, or looking good, is not having any of our schools in improvement, because it's not good. Do we want to have better scores and improve? Sure we do. But does the system need to change? Yes, it does. And I'll talk about that in just a second. The opt-out letter, just going back a couple years ago, we received a correspondence from the state superintendent, Pat Ride, who basically said there's a lot of energy right now out there relative to parents wanting to opt their children out of SOL testing. And what she was telling superintendents to do is, if parents choose that option to opt their children out, you have to send them this letter. And the letter kind of outlines their rights. It says what the ramifications are of opting out, and then at the bottom it basically says, here's the test I don't want my children to take, and then they sign it. So we were required to send this. We were not required to send a letter to all parents saying you may opt out of SOL testing. We only send the letters if they did opt out of SOL testing. But I'll go on record right now as saying, if parents want to opt their children out of testing, more power to them. I frankly don't feel terribly strongly one way or the other, because I think that's a parent's right, and if it's that stressful to a child to prepare and take an SOL test, then I don't begrudge any parent for making that decision. But just remember, there are consequences for doing that, not for the child, but for the child's school and potentially the child's teacher. Next, there were some general comments about the need to overhaul the testing system. Agree. Differing testing practices among schools. In terms of test scheduling and preparation for the SOL tests, yes, they're all different. All of our schools do something different. The implication and the concern from the parent was that some schools do handle testing differently and preparation for testing differently so that they get better scores, so that they look better. Well, I never want to be the person that says I stay away from using the words always and never as much as I can, but I can tell you, if there was an optimum way to prepare for SOL tests, to review, to take the test, to have the optimum test schedule, and there was data to support it, every one of our schools would do it. And I don't want to say I know that for gospel truth, but I can tell you, not at least 9 out of 10 schools would say, if this is the best way to do it and there's data to support it, this is the way we're going to do it. Because it's high stakes, high pressure testing, and it's, is it tough on kids? Yes. Is it tough on teachers? Yes. Does anyone like it? No. No one likes SOL testing. My first experience with SOL testing as a proctor administrator was my second year as an assistant principal in Louisa County in 1997, and it was terrible. It's terrible then, and it's terrible now. It's stressful, it's high stakes, high accountability, but it is the system we have. That's the bad news. The good news is we made progress, and when I say we, I'm talking about me specifically. I served on the state assessment panel for superintendents a few years back. I wrote a position paper on what I thought should be done, and my paper, along with a few others, served as a cornerstone for legislation that was introduced, whereby we ended up with fewer SOL tests. The next steps for us as a state are to reduce the number of tests even further, and you can help us with that by just contacting your legislators, whomever they are. But anyway, they're limiting the number of tests, changing the type of tests that we give so that they're more progress monitoring type tests rather than just spit out information, just provide chunks of information and answer the question. Perhaps we need to be developing tests where students actually do, and they show that they can do. Project-based learning is a good example of that's where we need to go, and that's what's being introduced at the state levels. That is what we do. That's what we need to do, and don't be surprised if that legislation comes through the General Assembly next year. And the other thing will be proposed next year, I think, in the General Assembly would be, instead of accrediting schools every year, go to like a 3 or 4 year cycle, so that it's not this high stakes, high pressure testing every year. It's spread out over a longer period of time. So that's a lot. I know there's a few other things listed mentioned in the letter. But no one likes testing, and I've been doing this, been involved in testing, as I mentioned, directly since 1997, and it's high stakes. And I had 2 kids graduate from Virginia schools, and they were in schools when this whole thing started, and it's not fun. It's difficult, and it's high stakes, and no one likes it, and it's high stress, and it takes the joy out of learning, and that's the truth. And what I've tried to do since I've been in Fauquier is de-emphasize, the teaching to the test and the high stakes, high pressure stuff. Maybe I've have not been intentional enough about it, but that's what I've tried to do. So that's a really long answer to some very legitimate concerns, and we're up to 10 minutes now, so it's probably my longest one hard question ever. So my secretary will kill me because she gets to type the transcripts up from these. But anyway, there's only one hard question coming. If you have any questions, comments about this one hard question, feel free. I can elaborate a little bit more on the sort of the wide range of topics I touched on. All right, thanks. Have a great rest of the